Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report. We'll talk a lot about the minor adjustments in USDA's latest report to Brazil, looking at the scope of Brazil and Argentina's crop. But when you look at U.S. ending stocks, we did see USDA trim corn ending stocks by 25 million bushels. We saw wheat the same. John, do you think that is because we have seen more buys come out of China and places like Mexico?
We're definitely keeping the export pace up at what was matching what USDA has estimates out. My concern is that the national yield is going to grow, and then when we come in that January report, the yield's actually a little bit bigger, and we're going to need all this export numbers to offset that number. So long term, I'm still very concerned about, are we getting enough demand? And the fact that China has been buying at Mexico has been buying at above normal pace concerns me, because I think that they're going to fall off in the spring.
Mike, do you have that same sentiment?
I do. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, if we can walk the South American crop forward without any real weather issues, they're going to have a lot to push into the world. And frankly, they don't have the storage capacity on pretty much any front. They're going to want to push as much as they can into the world market, and that really puts our export numbers in question.
John, at this point, do we know why China is coming in and buying more U.S. wheat?
I think it's just a function of that they've had some poor quality around the world. They're seeing an opportunity right here. They've seen some value on prices, and that's giving them a quick opportunity to add a little bit into their storage.
Mike, do you think this has some longevity to it? Do you think this has some legs, or do you think this is short-term, just filling some of those needs that they may have because of that short crop?
Yeah, that short crop it's definitely been what's inspired them to come to the market. But I think, as you look at elsewhere in the world, Australia has had some real issues with their wheat crop and downgraded a bunch of their soft red. We've got certainly available supplies and growing inventories here in the United States. And, if I look to places like Argentina to try to fill in gaps, everybody's still scratching their head waiting to see what the new president does with export tax. So, a lot of people are kind of in a holding pattern. We're the best option out there. So if I'm China and I know I have a short crop, I'm going to try to get ahead of that. And U.S. is a great opportunity right now, especially with the U.S. dollar coming down, 3% here over the last few weeks.
John, you mentioned the January reports, and we know those are bigger reports and have more of an impact potentially on the markets. What do you think is worst case scenario, and what do you think is best case scenario heading into January?
Best case scenario is that they don't change the yield at all. I think the worst case scenario is that they add another 2 to 3 bushels per acre onto this. Based upon the producers I've talked to across the entire country, everyone is absolutely surprised by their yields, and most of them are all to the positive. I would say I had less than 10% of the clients that were telling me that the yields were worse than they expected, and that was only if they were in kind of a middle of Nebraska to Sioux City area. That was the only area that kind of saw some really bad potential outside of Northeast Iowa.
Mike, are you concerned about global soybean demand, though?
I am. If you look at USDA's reporting over the last few years, they've really been overshooting what I'll call actuals. And that is the flip of the trend that we saw in all the years preceding 2018. It used to be that, they would raise their expectations from the prior year by about 2%, and then we'd land at about 5% higher. We came into 2018 and they took the opposite approach. They started modeling growth at about a 5% rate, and by the time we'd get to the end of the year, we'd only grow about 1.5 to 2% over the prior year. So if you look at the current math against the balance sheet that we've been running on, there's room for overall demand to drop by as much as 20 million metric tons based on what we're seeing right now. And in an environment where the overall global economic situation is what I'll call soft or questionable, you really have to take a look at whether or not we're going to be able to hit their numbers.
Mike North, John Sheaf, thank you so much for joining us this weekend. Up next, a one-building town. We're off to Illinois with American Countryside next.